TNCRadio.LIVE, your commercial driver navigation station.
Good afternoon. This is TNCRadio.LIVE, and this is the Truckers Network Radio Show with your host, Shelley Johnson.
Thank you, Tom. Yes, this is the Truckers Network Radio Show on TNCRadio.LIVE, where we offer the entertainment, sports, weather, traffic, and news that commercial drivers want to hear. We like to keep our drivers informed about health issues, and mental health is a very important part of that. Did you know there's a condition called smiling depression? We're going to talk about that today. Depression has become a major problem for many people, especially drivers who feel like they can never overcome it. Today, we have Cory Reese, a social worker, counselor, and author with us to talk about mental health and depression and a powerful new approach to overcome it. He's authored the books Nowhere Near First, Into the Furnace, and Stronger Than the Dark. Stronger Than the Dark offers a compelling and vulnerable insight into the pervasive destruction of depression. Cory's also a columnist for Ultra Running magazine, a licensed clinical social worker, and he's a passionate mental health advocate. Welcome, Cory. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks, Shelley. I'm happy to be joining you.
It sounds like you've got some great insight to share with our listeners. I guess I thought we could start with telling everybody about yourself, your personal journey, and what led you to becoming a mental health advocate.
Well, I have a background in a few different things. I've been a social worker for almost 20 years. I've done some private practice counseling, and right now I'm working in medical social work with people who are on dialysis. I've been doing that specific part for about 16 years. The other side thing that I do is marathon and ultramarathon running. So I think getting out there on the trails is my form of therapy. And so, I've been doing ultramarathons for quite a few years and written some books about ultramarathon running. This new book takes a little bit different approach. I write about running, but also the relationship that it has to mental health. And it's just a topic that I've worked with professionally for a long time. But over the past couple of years, I started experiencing some depression myself that was new, that I hadn't experienced before. So that kind of gave me a different insight to what it really means to experience depression.
Before we talk about depression, I had a quick question. What's the difference between marathon running and ultra marathon running? Does that mean you run twice as fast? Or?
Good question. So a marathon is 26.2 miles, and I ran a bunch of marathons when I first got into the sport, and really loved the challenge and the sense of accomplishment and the running community. And then I discovered trail running and just being outside on the dirt and running through the desert or forest. And I just really fell in love with that. And back then I usually had a day off during the week. And so when my kids were in school, my favorite thing to do was to just go out and spend the whole day on the trail, hiking, running. I just loved being out there. And I realized, well, an ultramarathon is basically like a full day on the trails. So an ultramarathon is anything beyond that 26.2 miles. So I started out running a couple 50-milers, and then really spent most of my time the last 5 or 6 or 7 years running 100-mile races. And I've run a couple that are farther than that too. The farthest one I've done is 314 miles, but yeah, Ooh. An ultramarathon is just anything beyond that 26.2 miles.
Okay. And I would think depression is not something that a runner would necessarily experience because you generate a lot of endorphins, don't you, when you run?
Yeah, definitely. So, running and just exercise in general is so important, such a key part of mental health, and running definitely fits into that. But the trick that people sometimes face is thinking that running is going to fix, like if they're struggling with mental health or depression, that running is going to make you immune from that, and that isn't always the case. So, but it is a huge part of building mental health to just get that exercise, whether it's, and it definitely doesn't need to be an ultra marathon. I mean, getting out and walking for a half hour is a great way to get the blood flowing, get those endorphins going. So yeah,
Sure.
it fits into that.
I think there's a lot of confusion and mystery about why depression happens. And I think it's a mystery to the person that's suffering from depression, and they may not even know it. What do you think was your trigger that launched you into depression?
Yeah, some people just seem to be stuck in that mindset year after year and have almost forgotten what it's like to feel good. I wasn't like that. That wasn't the case for me. I've always been pretty optimistic and positive, outgoing, and happy. For me, it was there were a couple things. I ended up leaving the religion that I had been raised in, and that triggered some I don't know, just kind of needing to develop my identity again, because it had been based off of the church that I had lived my life in. And then the second thing was being diagnosed with a chronic health issue. It's called common variable immunodeficiency disorder, which is just a long way of saying that my immune system doesn't work. And so I had to start doing these infusions every week that I'll have to do for the rest of my life. And so it kind of affected my health and my running, and the running is something that's so important to me. And so when my health kind of started to take that away, it was really the combination of those things that I think triggered those emotions that I hadn't really experienced before.
How did you get out from under that and find a way to overcome the depression?
For me, it was a hard thing, because despite the progress that's been made, there is still a stigma against mental health, and I was embarrassed to admit that I needed help or that I was even struggling, because I think I don't know. I think part of it is that men kind of struggle with, we just have this masculinity thing where we have to be strong and hard and not need to rely on others. And so
with messages like you're not supposed to cry and all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's the kind of stuff that keeps us stuck. And so it really boiled down to just admitting that I was having these challenges before anything was going to change. It took just that step of, for me, it was talking to my wife and saying, "Hey, I've been having some challenges," and that's really where the catalyst for change started.
So was it something that was a progressive onset of depression and kind of a progression to get out of it? Because I don't think a lot of people, when they are suffering from depression initially, even know what the heck's going on.
Gosh, that is the truth. I mean, for so long, I just thought, okay, well, I'm having a hard time. I'm at a low point. Like everyone has highs and lows, and it'll work out. It'll get better. But after a while, you kind of get to a point of like, this isn't getting better. Nothing's changing. So I think you're exactly right. It's easy to just kind of minimize it and think it's not that big a deal, or maybe I don't really have anything to be very depressed about, so it's probably not depression. Those things are so common, and that's what keeps people stuck.
Oh, absolutely. We're going to be covering more detail on this, Cory, because there's so many things to unpack when it comes, I think, to the topic of depression, and you've got some really great insight. We're talking to Cory Reese, who's a social worker and author of Stronger Than the Dark. You're listening to the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.LIVE. I'm Shelley Johnson here with Tom Kelly. We'll be back with more insight from Cory coming up. Being on the road can make you feel free, excited, and adventurous. It can also make you feel lonely and even depressed. So it's important for truckers, especially long-haul truck drivers, to bring items on the road to keep them entertained. Truckers have 10 hours off for a 24-hour day. Depending on how long the driver sleeps, there can be several hours where the trucker has nothing to do. We've broken down the list of essential items to keep in your truck in several different categories. The second category we talk about is entertainment. Laptop or tablet. Bring a laptop or tablet and stream your favorite movies or TV shows. If you don't have access to Wi-Fi or a personal hotspot, you can still bring your laptop, some DVDs, and watch a movie. Game console. Playing games is a great way to keep yourself entertained. You can also play with your friends. Bring your Xbox or PlayStation and set up your own gaming station in the cab of your truck. Puzzles, crosswords, or cards. If gaming or watching movies don't interest you, bring some puzzles or crosswords to solve. You can also get a deck of cards and play games like Solitaire, March Same Rank, Devil's Grip, Klondike. Books. Reading books is a great way to pass time and improve brain connectivity. Some popular trucker books include The Highway by C.J. Box, Blue Highways by William Least Heat Moon, Paradise Valley by C.J. Box, Rough Way to the Highway by Kelly Mac McCoy. Exercise equipment. Truck drivers' health suffers from the lack of exercise. Bringing exercise equipment on the road will keep you entertained and improve your overall well-being. There's several portable exercise equipment items you can store in the cab of your truck. They include dumbbells, resistance bands, kettlebells, and running shoes.
TNCRadio.LIVE, your commercial driver navigation station.
This is the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.LIVE. I'm Shelley Johnson here with Tom Kelly. We're talking with Cory Reese, social worker and author of Stronger Than the Dark. Cory, we were talking about depression and kind of unpacking a little bit about it because it's still kind of a mystery to a lot of people. You were talking about the experience you've had with it and how people don't always get help. You were actually reluctant to do so too. What was it that made you finally realize you had to reach out and get some help?
I was doing this 314-mile race. It's called the Vol State 500K. So this 314-mile race goes across Tennessee, and so you have 10 days or less to finish this race, and wow. No aid stations along the way, no support. You just get the food and water that you need from the gas stations you pass by, and some people just sleep in the back of a store or in the park they pass by, or some people will get a motel room for a few hours to sleep in the heat of the day. So you have a route that you need to cover and 10 days or less to do it. And so I was with my friends, Jeff and Carol, for almost the whole race. And we just had the highs and lows that you'd expect to have during an event like that. But of course, in this race is in July, in Tennessee is very hot and muggy. And
oh, yeah.
So I had really bad blisters, and they seemed to get worse every day. And I tried to do what I could to help the blisters get better, but I think I was fighting a losing battle. And so I think it was maybe day 7. We had gotten a motel room to sleep for a few hours in the afternoon. And when we went back out on the road again, we had about 40 more miles to go to the finish line, but my feet hurt so bad that I was having a hard time just even walking across the street. And my friend Carol said, I have a lot of help. I have a lot of experience fixing blisters. I could help you. And I just have this kind of prideful, I don't want to depend on anyone else. I don't want to let anyone else help me. I need to be strong. But at that moment, I was so desperate for help that I agreed to let her help me. And so we sat down, and I took off my shoes, and she started patching up my blisters. And normally I'm not a very emotional person, but right then I just had my eyes filled with tears, and I kind of had that, like, the ugly cry, where just the breakdown. And it was just a pretty emotional moment and part of that was that emotion was coming from pain, like my feet hurt. But part of it was that I had never really let myself be vulnerable and let myself be helped by someone before. And it was just a really powerful experience for me. And Carol happened to look up and notice the tears coming down my eyes, and she immediately started crying too. And it was a really, I don't know, it just showed me that vulnerability is what people connect with. And I guess that's what my biggest takeaway was from this race, was that it's okay to ask for help. And we ended up finishing the race. And it was pretty soon after I got home that I tried to really implement that lesson in my life and ask for help. And so that's when I first opened up to my wife and said, this is something that I'm experiencing, and I think I need some help with. But I don't know if I would have gotten to that point without having had that experience during the race, because I'm stubborn. I want to try to do it myself. And now I finally realize there's better ways to do this.
How long had you struggled with depression before you finally reached out to find a solution and get some help?
I think I had been stuck in it for probably a year, where I was just not happy with how I was feeling inside. And I don't know, it was kind of like being stuck in a black cloud, and I didn't know how to get out.
Sure.
So it was a while.
So what was the solution you found? I know that I was looking through some of your materials, and there was the term smiling depression. Mm-hmm. What is that exactly?
Yeah, there's a couple. Some people call it smiling depression or functional depression. Mm-hmm. So that was me. Like I didn't want to be a burden to anyone. I didn't want to admit that I was having a challenge or that I needed some help. So I just covered all of that up with a smile. And I basically just wore a mask that I'm okay. I'm good. I've got everything together because of that stigma. And so people with functional depression, they can still go do their job. They can interact with other people. They get good at hiding how they're feeling. And some people are really good at it. I was one of those. I was an expert at the smiling depression, where I used a smile to cover up what was really going on inside.
And I think a lot of people, especially if they've had maybe abuse in childhood and that sort of thing, they can have depression, and they just learn to live with it, and they mask it like you're talking, so they can function, but they've never really truly been happy. And then maybe there comes a point where it just kind of, there's a breaking point. It just gets worse and worse. And of course, unfortunately, some people don't get help, and then you hear about a suicide or something.
Yeah, right.
Depression's definitely not something to ignore. Is it as much of a denial within a person as it is the stigma too?
Yeah, gosh. See, that's such a great point. There are so many lies that depression tells people. So I think one of the biggest lies that depression tells is, I'm alone. No one understands how I feel, or no one is experiencing that. Another lie, like you said, the denial, like it's probably not that big a deal. It's fine. Or I don't have anything to be depressed about. So it's probably, I'm probably just blowing it out of proportion. It's fine. Those lies keep people from getting the help that they need. And so then that just results in continuing to stay stuck in that dark cloud. And like you said, it can get worse. The longer it goes on, the worse it can get. It's that secrecy that fuels those feelings.
And people quite often will turn to drugs and alcohol.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, there are so many different coping strategies. Some are helpful and some are destructive and contribute even more to it. So,
sure.
I mean, it's understandable to see people turn to drugs or alcohol because they're doing it out of desperation to feel better or get a temporary break from the pain. But then it just compounds the problem. Like those things aren't fixing it. They're just numbing it for a little bit.
Yeah. Before we go to break, I had one quick question. What causes depression? Is it a biological or neurochemical? What happens that causes it? That is a big part of it. Sometimes it's situational, like things that have happened, maybe a death of a loved one, or where it goes beyond just grief, where people get stuck in long-term depression. Sometimes it's life situations. Sometimes it is that biological or chemical component. So that's what makes it tricky. A lot of times it's a combination of all of those things. Well, it's still, I think, a mystery. And that's unfortunate. And people are trying to find answers so desperately and don't always know where to look. We're talking with Cory Reese, social worker and author of the book Stronger Than the Dark. We're going to get more insights coming up next. You're listening to the Truckers Network radio show here on TNCRadio.LIVE. Stay tuned for more.
This blog is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. 4 simple ways to improve your physical health as a truck driver. Being a truck driver is a rewarding career. However, it's not very rewarding for your physical health. A truck driver's lifestyle makes it difficult for them to be healthy. Because of their lifestyle, truckers are more likely to develop serious health issues like obesity, high blood pressure, diabetes, and more. Although a truck driver's lifestyle doesn't promote healthy living, it doesn't mean that a truck driver cannot be healthy while on the road. There's several ways you can improve your health on the road. Here are 4 things you can start doing today to improve your physical health on the road as a truck driver. Avoid harmful foods. Avoiding unhealthy foods is way harder than it sounds. As a truck driver, your healthy food choices are extremely limited. While it may seem impossible to completely cut out unhealthy foods from your diet, it might be a good idea to cut back. You can start cutting back on unhealthy foods by packing meals in your truck. That way, the next time you get hungry on the road, you can eat a much healthier meal instead of eating greasy, high-calorie fast food. Another way you can start cutting back on unhealthy foods is to make a list of unhealthy items you eat every day and start slowly replacing them with a healthier option. For example, if you drink soda 3 times a day, cut back to 2, then to 1, and then none. Stock up on healthy foods. To live a healthier lifestyle, you have to cut back on heavily processed foods. Unfortunately, a truck driver's diet heavily consists of processed foods. Stocking up on healthy groceries is one of the best ways you can improve your physical health. When grocery shopping before your trip, avoid frozen pre-made meals, sodas, fried foods, chips. Instead, look for whole grain, fruits, veggies, and healthy fats. Start exercising. Exercise is essential to a driver's overall physical and mental health. Truck drivers have to get creative to stay fit while on the road. Finding the time to exercise can be a challenge for truck drivers. Drivers spend up to 11 hours a day on the road. After working all day, exercising may seem like the last thing you want to do, but you'll thank yourself later. Exercising a few times a week will not only improve your physical health, but also mental health. Get a good night's rest. The right amount of sleep is crucial for a truck driver. Lack of sleep can make driving dangerous. A study shows that long-haul truck drivers obtain less sleep than the required amount of alertness on the job. Truckers need a good night's sleep to be fully alert and ready to take on the road the next morning. Truck drivers travel several hundred miles each day. To reach their destination on time, they'll have to prioritize sleep so they can be alert and ready to take on the day. Not only is sleep an important factor for job performance, but it's also important for lowering stress levels and improving your immune system. Now, here are some ways to promote better sleep. Turn off electronics an hour before bed. Invest in a good mattress and pillow. Put up curtains in your truck cab. Avoid caffeine before bed. And exercise. This blog was brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net.
Enjoy the best in trucker-style music and comedy weeknights, starting at 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern, right here on TNCRadio.LIVE.
This is the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.LIVE. I'm Shelley Johnson with Tom Kelly. We're talking with Cory Reese, a social worker and author of Stronger Than the Dark. Cory, we were talking about depression and some of the causes of it and how it impacts people. So many people are hesitant to get help because they go to the doctor and all they get's a pill, which they don't necessarily want. And that doesn't even treat the cause.
Yeah, that's a problem that a lot of people face. I think part of it is that doctors, a lot of doctors are inadequately equipped to really handle mental health stuff. That's, for a lot of people, that's a lot of doctors. That's not the focus of their practice. And so they're kind of trying to do the best that they can and feeling things out. But a lot of doctors are not experts in that area. I had kind of an interesting experience. So after I talked with my wife, I felt like as a team together, we kind of brainstormed, okay, what are we going to do to get things back on track? And so I did talk to my doctor, and I am so appreciative. I'm so fortunate that I have a good doctor who took the time to talk about this kind of stuff. The other limitation that doctors often have is they've got this time schedule where they have to crank through the patients, and their time is limited, and they don't have time to really get into it. And so they write a prescription.
Especially in recent years.
Yes.
Very true.
Yeah, they just write the prescription for a pill because that's all the time they have. And luckily, I had a doctor who took the time, and so we talked about it. And he pulled out a piece of paper and he drew a bunch of circles on the paper, and in the middle he drew a big circle, and inside that he wrote depression. And then in all of the little circles around it, he wrote different things. Like one of them was the biological and chemical part of depression. And he said, for a lot of people, there is that chemical component of our brains where maybe we just really are not making enough of a certain chemical, and it's contributing to the depression. That's such an important thing to consider. And an antidepressant can help regulate those chemicals and get that back on track. But then he said, there's also all of these other circles. So he labeled the other circles, things like physical health, things like getting enough sleep and eating right, spirituality, thought distortions, like the way that we think, our behavioral patterns. All of those things are also components of depression. And so he said, we can try an antidepressant for this chemical part of it, but that can't be at the expense of addressing all of these other things. And so he said the biggest problem that he runs into is that he has this talk with patients, and then they'll come back in a couple months and say, this pill isn't working for me. I'm still feeling depressed. And he said, in those situations, most of the time, it's because they were expecting the pill to fix everything without addressing all of those other circles. So a pill is one piece of a big puzzle, and it's not just a magic fix. There's all those other things that need to be addressed also.
Absolutely. And of course, especially in the American society, you watch commercials and it's, here, take this pill.
Yeah.
With a laundry list of side effects, but this pill's going to be the miracle pill. Just take this pill.
Right.
So we're conditioned to, hey, this chemical is going to help me, and I can just get on down the road.
Exactly. And then people are disappointed or discouraged or frustrated when their life doesn't look like the commercial.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. And even, oh my gosh, people looking at Facebook and all of the social media today, everything looks so rosy. That just adds to depression, because you just kind of look at that and go, gee, my life sucks. How come everybody's happy in these pictures? And it's not realistic. Yeah.
It's true. We're seeing a curated fraction of a person's life, and usually we're not seeing the whole story. But we compare what we know of our life, which there's messy things, to what we're seeing from other people's lives, which is only the rosy, cheery, happy things.
Right.
So you're exactly right. That is a big factor in it.
So you found a way to overcome depression. It's a powerful approach. Why don't you tell our listeners what you found that really worked?
Yeah, what I realized is that there's tools that I can take from running and from exercise that can be applied to mental health. So for me, I realized in my races, like in running, we accept hard times. Like we run races knowing that they're going to be hard, and knowing that if we keep pushing, we'll finish the race and we'll get that sense of accomplishment. We'll feel better afterward. And so, it's about embracing. We talk about in running, embrace the pain cave. Like it's okay to admit that you're having those hard times and embrace it, feel it. So for me, I tried to avoid those feelings. I tried to pretend that they weren't there instead of just embracing and saying, okay, this is the reality. And I can do this. I can get through this. I have experiences from the past that I can call on to get through hard times. So, I mean, that was a big part of it. And I think that talking with other people, I took the risk of going to talk to a therapist myself. And that was such a challenge for me, I guess, because I just thought, like, I've done therapy myself. Like I know about depression. I don't want to admit that maybe I need some help myself. And that was such a naive way of thinking, because getting that outside perspective is so valuable, so helpful. And sometimes there's things that I'm not seeing that are obvious to someone else. And so just getting that outside perspective shifted so much for me.
It was probably more of a challenge for you too, because you're a therapist. You're sitting on the other side of that desk and saying, they're using this therapy on me. I don't agree.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. The very first time I had my first session, this therapist that I met with said, "So how do you feel coming to therapy as a social worker?" I said, "Well, I'm kind of embarrassed. Like I feel like I should be able to do this on my own." And she said, "Yeah, I understand. That's how I felt when I went to therapy for the first time myself." I'm like,
Yeah.
wait, what? You like, it's okay. I'm not broken. Like, it's okay to do this. And she said, "Yeah, like all of us have stuff we need to work through, and it's not something to feel shame or embarrassment about." It was kind of a light bulb for me, like, oh, okay, it's all right.
So did you discover new things about yourself that may have contributed to the depression?
Yeah, I think it was, I mean, the hard thing about therapy is that sometimes you're forced to look at things that you might not want to look at. And the therapist that I went to, sometimes she would say things that were like an aha moment, like, oh, I didn't think about that before. I like that. And then sometimes she would say things that I just did not understand. Like I did not see what she was saying. I didn't understand where she was coming from. And so it poked a little bit. And then I had to like go home and do some thinking. And every single time on those times where I got poked about what she was saying, it ended up like, wow, I would have never seen these things. So I think that's the value of an outside perspective, is
absolutely
just pointing out like thoughts, that, like thinking patterns and behavior patterns and stuff you're just used to doing. And
we have to go to break. I'm so very sorry, Cory. We will be back with more on TNCRadio.LIVE right after this.
While driving in the rain. As a truck driver, you'll experience driving in dangerous weather conditions. Driving in the rain creates difficult and dangerous driving conditions for truckers. It's important for truck drivers to be alert and cautious when driving in the rain. Check out our 6 safety tips for truck drivers while driving in the rain. Slow down. Wet roads make it difficult for a driver to control their truck. A good rule of thumb is to drive 5 miles per hour below the speed limit. In some cases, you might have to drive more than 5 miles an hour below. Professional truck drivers adjust their speed according to the weather. When driving in dangerous conditions, only drive the speed you're comfortable with. Leave space. Leaving the appropriate amount of space between each vehicle will give a truck driver enough time to react. A fully loaded tractor-trailer traveling at 65 miles an hour needs about 5 seconds of space to stop. Drivers will have to increase the space between the cars while driving in dangerous weather conditions. Maintain your vehicle. Having your vehicle routinely checked will make driving in the rain more safe. Frequently check your truck's tires to make sure they have enough tread. Also, check your windshield wipers to see if they're working properly. Avoid standing water. Driving through standing water increases the chance of hydroplaning. Hydroplaning causes a driver to lose control of the truck and can result in serious injuries. Standing water also hides potholes and other debris that might be on the road. It's important to always avoid standing water while driving in the rain. Wear your seatbelt. Wearing a seatbelt is a requirement for all truckers, especially in dangerous weather conditions. Eliminate distractions. While driving in the rain, eliminate all distractions. If you drive with the radio on, turn the volume low so you can concentrate. Avoid touching your GPS or looking at it for long periods of time, and avoid using your cell phone. This blog on TNCRadio.LIVE has been brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net.
Hey, what's up, y'all? This is Claire Dunn, and you're listening to TNCRadio.LIVE.
This is the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.LIVE. I'm Shelley Johnson with Tom Kelly. We're talking with Cory Reese, a social worker and author of Stronger Than the Dark. We've been talking about depression and how he has overcome depression. He's got some great insights. Cory, what do you recommend for our driver listeners who may not always have the time to go to a counselor, and certainly they aren't necessarily runners? How do they capture this powerful approach you have to getting over this dark beast that can hang over them?
Yeah, I think there are a few things. I think actually just the stuff that my doctor talked to me about, those different circles. And so things like getting out and getting some exercise, and, you know, if that's a 20-minute walk, that's good for mental health. I think it optimally is a tag team from different directions. So it could be getting some exercise, talking to someone else. For some people, it's just self-help books, listening to audiobooks while out on the road are helpful. I would say if it is something that has been an ongoing problem, that people have been stuck for quite a while, it's going to take a hard step of doing something uncomfortable and difficult and talk to someone, whether that's a doctor or a therapist or a friend or spouse. At least for me, it just taking that first step lifted so much of the weight and the burden off my shoulders. Sure.
So this approach you found, how can drivers apply it? I guess I'm trying to get the concept in their minds on how they can take from what you learned from running to conquering their own depression.
Yeah, for me it was just embracing the challenge, and embracing and admitting and recognizing the difficulties instead of pretending they're not there, instead of putting on the mask of a smile or trying to be tough or pretend that everything's okay. It really begins, the healing really begins with just facing the challenge. And for so many people, including myself, that's a really hard step to do, to just face it, admit that it's there, and stop denying and avoiding it.
And I would think with drivers, they're isolated a lot. That just kind of adds to compounding the problem, doesn't it?
It really does. Yeah. So that's the challenge that they would have to face. I think that personal connection is just such a critical component of healing, and it's hard to do that alone in isolation. And so whether that's on days off or whatever, however that looks for their specific situation, but I think the isolation, you're so right. It just, when you're stuck in your own little bubble, it's not going to improve.
And with long-term depression, doesn't it take a while to basically retrain the brain and everything? I mean, we're creatures of habit too. So
yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. If you've been living a certain way for so many years, it's going to take some time to untangle that and retrain yourself to do things differently.
Yeah, because I would think with chronic depression, people are going to kind of exacerbate it. They play into it. They get real negative, perhaps, or maybe sometimes they do try to break out of it, but it comes out the wrong way. They're angry, or because I think there's a combination of behaviors that can go into depression. People think, oh, depression is somebody that's, wadded up into a little ball on the couch.
Right.
That's not necessarily true.
Especially for men. I mean, a lot of times for men, it shows up through anger. You're exactly right.
So how do drivers get the help they need on the road when they don't always have time to make an appointment with a counselor?
Well, these days it's easier than ever to. There's a lot of accesses to therapy that don't have to be in person. There's flexible times. A lot of services just found through Google, like online therapist, and that those you can meet with a good therapist wherever you are, whenever. There's flexible times, and so it's more accessible now than ever. It used to be that you'd have to go into someone's office, sit across the couch, and talk to someone face to face. Just even in the last year or two, so much progress has been made to make stuff like this more accessible for people who need help.
Oh, sure. Well, especially with the pandemic, telehealth has really blown up. And in a way, I think it takes away some of the stigma and barriers, because people can say, well, nobody's going to see me other than the therapist.
Exactly.
So they don't have to feel like, gee, I have to sneak into this building. Because, some people do feel that way. They feel like, wow, I'm a failure and there's a stigma and I'm crazy. And it's none of that.
Exactly. You're exactly right.
So where do people find your book, Cory? I'm sure that actually reading your book and your experience will really help people too.
Yeah, the book Stronger Than the Dark is on Amazon or Kindle or Audible. For me, I love to read, but it's hard to actually find the time to sit down with a book. So I usually go the audiobook route. So it is on audiobook through Audible, and yeah.
And that's so important. You have your own website too, right?
I do. Yeah. CoryReese.com has some resources for getting help with stuff like this. Yeah.
Excellent. And Tom, you had a quick question for Cory?
Yeah, Cory, I was just wondering, among everything else you're doing, how'd you find time to write a book?
I took a little break from running for a while, and when you're out running for hours at a time, you can kind of figure things out in your mind. And so then I'd just come and sit down behind the computer after having thought through things out on my runs.
So it just kind of poured out then, huh?
Yeah.
I find that amazing. And we hear, isn't that what some of our musical artists say too? Shelley, is that they're just driving, and when they stop, it just comes out.
Yeah.
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 Yep.
Well, I would imagine after you ran a marathon, you're either totally exhausted or you're so wired up. It's like your brain's just working at 150 miles an hour.
That's right. Exactly. Physically, you're tired. Mentally, you're energized.
Sure, your brain's saying, hey, I can keep going. Let's do it.
Yep.
We have a couple minutes left. I wanted you to let everybody know where they can get your book again and where to find you.
Sure. I'm on social media on Facebook. And then one of the things that I felt was really important when I released this new book was to build up my website so that people would, if they do come to learn more about the book, they'll be able to find some resources there for extra help and support ideas. And so, there's that website, just the CoryReese.com. And then depending on how people like to digest their information, there's hard copy books or the ebooks through Kindle or audiobooks. And the audiobook for this actually has about 70 minutes of bonus stuff at the end in addition to the book.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Cory. We've been talking with Cory Reese. He's a social worker and an author. He's got a great book called Stronger Than the Dark that will help you have some definite insights on depression. You're listening to the Truckers Network Radio Show. I'm Shelley Johnson with Tom Kelly on TNCRadio.LIVE. Stay tuned for more.
Thanks so much for listening to this podcast. For more information regarding our podcast, reuse, copyrights, etc., please visit our website, www.tncradio.live.